Okay, as we know, we have problems with city urban design, and one of the problems is the traffic. That's why I've been so late and I couldn't listen to the presentation of Mariano. I know several of his works, so I'm used to what he's going to say, but it always is a surprise. So I'm sorry for that. But anyway, this is an image that you probably know. Is the transformation of the city of Shenzhen in China in several years. You see this growing cancer in a way, and we know that something has gone wrong with urban design, and I won't recap about that. You are all experts in this subject. I just want to stress that architecture doesn't perform better. So the two things are going together. This division between architecture and urban design is just a huge mistake that comes from the same reason that produced much of the disasters we have in our urban world. What is important is understanding why we have this problem. And my opinion as a philosopher, let's say, if we want to use this term, is like we have cities that comes out from a vision of the world, from a vision of human being. And this vision says that we are machines. The so-called smart city is just an evolution of the same trend. It says that we are objects that can be manipulated and that have to produce something. So cities are kind of machines to produce something that has nothing to do with human happiness or human socializing, whatever, but it's something that is heteronomic to the human being. It can be the neoliberal financial economy or the so-called industrial capitalism of the late 50 years, or the Soviet capitalism, because we got kind of Soviet capitalism, not state capitalism. There's not much difference. And in fact, if you look at the urban design and architecture of the Soviet time or the American time of the 70s, they are similar. So there is not such a big difference. So let's back to Italy, 1516, Venice. We got this area of beautiful town, city of Venice, called the Ghetto. The Ghetto is where the, let's say, the government of Venice put all the Jewish. They say you should stay there because you are dangerous, we should be divided from you. And this is the beginning of zoning. This guy, everybody knows who is that, invented this idea of zoning. So we should have cities that are split in different areas, like a mechanism, and they have to produce accordingly, not? There are these other two guys, Engels and Karl Marx, had a long discussion about why industrial cities are ugly. They noticed that. Well, they were philosophers. At that time, philosophers had a lot of free time, so they could waste their time discussing about different subjects. And one of that was exactly this particular subject, why cities are ugly. And they say, well, of course, it's normal, because capitalism needs to cut social connection. A beautiful city is a place where social connection grow up and flourish, so they have to make it ugly. And they were noticing, especially they were focusing on London. You got ugliness, stink, noise. At that time there were not so much traffic, but they noticed that the city has become a kind of highway of fluxes, and these fluxes were about, goods to be traded. We have also another important note, it's about the biopolitics of control. So cities becomes a kind of instrument, a kind of machine to control the population, so to avoid, for example, riots. You got another aspect that's very relevant in cities. You got cognitive overstimulation. Now we know that this kind of overstimulation produces physical effects on our body. I won't go much into that, but now I'm here after 3 hours of traffic. My blood pressure is probably very high, and my behavior pretty antisocial. We know Dr. Jackson made beautiful presentation. I loved his presentation at the IDRA conference, and he's speaking about the environment influence our body, our, for example, obesity and whatever. He said this very nice thing, tell me what is your address and I will tell you how long are you going to live. This is an example, early puberty. This is a phenomenon that goes with modernity, especially in urban environment. You got a menarche of girls and boys coming up very, very early. There are several causes of this phenomenon. Of course, we are talking in a frame of complexity, so there is not a linear cause that produce some effects, of course. It's a context. And one of them, for example, is television viewing. What has to do television viewing with urbanism? Well, think of children who come back and live in suburbia. They have nothing to do but stay in front of a screen, watching TV or, surfing the web or whatever. It's obesity. Well, if they have no chance of walking because, for example, the neighbor is dangerous or the only thing they can do is commuting by car, they will probably become obese. And if there are no vibrant environments where you have good restaurants, for example, but you have just junk food, that is also an output in their health. And this also helps this phenomenon. This is just an example, more old example, the concentrationary city of control, what I was saying before. Everybody knows the history of Haussmann transforming Paris. Paris was a middle-aged city, so with narrow alley, a little bit confusing, and they decide to destroy this urban structure to make big alley in order to the army to be deployed very fast and control riots. If you got riots in urban areas that are very narrow, it's very difficult to take control of them. When it's very difficult to make a barricade on a big alley, for example. The goal is pretty easy to understand. The city must produce. And must produce must be efficient. This efficiency is in the frame of infinity. Infinity is a category that was considered very bad by the ancient Greek, for example. Infinity is something bad for an ancient Greek. It means something that is not complete. Well, this is at the center of the idea of modernity. We have to grow up indefinitely, So it's a kind of perspective of objective growth. What I want to say is that transmission is not communication. We are now, everybody, all of us is transmitting every day, on Facebook, Twitter, on phone. We are transmitting information. We are receiving this transmission of information. There's nothing to do with communicating. Communicating comes from Latin word cum unum actio. Have an action together, putting something together. It can be conflict, it can be love, it can be whatever, but it's putting something together. We are not doing it anymore. The only thing we are sharing is the transmission of data. And this comes because we have a vision of human being as a machine. To be more exact, we have an idea of human beings as a kind of phantom inside a body that is a machine, the Cartesian vision of the world. And we consider the body to be a machine in connection with reality, like a robot, and we are controlling it from inside. In reality, this is not how it works. Our body is not something that is separate from our being. We are our body. We don't own a body. For example, our cognitive system is not something that is concentrated in our brain. It's something that is in our flesh. This guy, René Descartes, was the one who put it down, this idea of splitting the two parts of human being. So you got res extensa, that means an extended physical part, and then a minding part, the mind. And they get connected in a strange way. He was talking about the pineal gland. So actually, with the knowledge of the time, he found that in the human body there is only one organ that is central. It's in the center of the brain, and it has not a double. This is the pineal gland. So he thought that the spirit was in a way pushing into this gland for making the robot move. Then there is another aspect. We have an overuse of representation and interfaces. I mean, computer, TV, even books. This is part of a long process, of course. And this brings us to think in terms of abstraction. So we rather speak to our ideas than to other people many times. design itself has become a kind of representation. This Cartesian design is about, representing something, making a sign. So we got architects who play artists. And this is not right, because design is much more than representation. It's something that affects flesh, bodies. There is no difference with the technology that is transforming everything that is flesh into something spiritual in a way. So now we have this modern town, modern contemporary cities, especially in Europe, that are so cute and cool. So designers love them, but they are so cold. And there is this connection. This connection is made because people, in a way, is not anymore in touch with each other. This goes, of course, with economics. Our civilization is going towards non-physical activity. One example is about the Twin Towers. Jean Baudrillard wrote a beautiful chapter in one of his books about the inauguration of the Twin Towers. And in a way, it overlaps with the no convertibility of gold and US dollar. So we go towards, we're skyrocketing towards a financial economy, no more related to real goods, but science. Larry Summers, a few years ago, was speaking about that the economy in which we live needs bubbles, needs something that grows, it's fake, it explodes, and then we start growing again, etc. It's a kind of fake ground, like this painting in New York City. I want to connect this with the idea of image we have. Now, everybody had a selfie, probably. This is a phenomenon that is very peculiar. You can see everywhere. If you go around Rome, you probably haven't seen so much selfie stick in your life, I guess. Is this civilization of image. So again, it's about sharing images, sharing representations. We are losing our connection with flesh. So we have a civilization that has never been less fleshy. In the Middle Ages, people were very fleshy. There is also a different way of experiencing time, not only space. The smart city is an example. So you got this new perspective on reality where time is pointless. You can communicate and be and act in every point in the space and time through the network. So just a synthesis. This story doesn't start yesterday. We had two very important figures, Martin Luther King, and Immanuel Kant, two great German thinkers who are masters of abstraction. This image comes from a book by Christopher Alexander. It shows how three kinds of nails. The first one you see is a modern one, the one you use every way when you punch on your thumb, because it's very easy to crack, and it's not beautiful at all. The second one belongs to a 19th century worker. It has a beautiful shape, and it's actually very resistant. The third one is a middle-aged one. Look at how beautiful it is and how practical it is. Wherever you hammer it, it goes in. You got something that we have lost. It has beauty and functionality stemming from a different root, something else. So they are not looking for an idea. The first one is very abstract in a way, In history of art, you have something similar. This is the one beautiful icon, the Holy Trinity by Andrei Rublev. The icon is not a painting. The icon is painted on wood or on a wall that represents solidity, reality. And the icon represents the divine, the reality that looks at you. So it's a kind of window that opens so you can see through reality. Then you got Italian Renaissance. Italians like beauty, they like good food and whatever, enjoying pleasure of life. And typically is canvas. We have got canvas that represent the surface of the world. They don't want to represent the reality. They want to represent how it shows up. So the canvas typically can be moved. you can move it according to the point of view of the subject. It's not something objective. It's something that is related to a subject that looks at it. And then you got my German friends, this Albert Dürer, Melancholia. You got engraving. Engraving is very abstract. It's representing an idea. It's not anymore representing reality per se. It's not anymore representing the skin of reality. It's representing the idea. A similar process is occurring more and more with modernity. So we got what they say, an interface inside. We start thinking and even perceiving reality through interface, through ideas. I think design is a possible way out. There have been authors who introduced this new way of designing cities, that is our common space. One of them is Christopher Alexander. It's about, as I told you before, be coherent to an underlying order that produces beauty and function, because it is in connection with reality. So, for example, the real need of moving through a city without getting stuck in traffic, and our perceptual system. So, a way of designing the city that it doesn't harm our neurophysiological system. Probably you know what are the mirror neuron system. You know the story. This was this scholar, playing with monkeys, the poor monkeys with electrode in her head, and a student come in eating nuts. And immediately, the monkey that was staring at the guy started producing, signals. Her brain was signaling like if she was eating the nuts. Actually, she wasn't. So they say, what is that? And they discovered this system. We have a system that is pre-motor. Our neuron reacts to what we see, and they enact our muscular activity. They trigger our muscular activity. They make it ready, even if we don't move. When you see an image like that, your motor neurons that are connected to the part that is armed in the figure there get triggered. The same happened when you look at the statues of Michelangelo, I Prigioni. Your muscles are receiving impulses from your nervous systems. And the same happened when you see somebody tracing a ladder. You don't move, but your brain is like reproducing the movement and preparing the pattern that will allow your muscles to move in that direction. The interesting thing is that it happens even if you don't see the movement. So if you see an A, your brain will react exactly as you are to write the A. This is very relevant. This example has been discovered looking at the works by Lucio Fontana, an artist of the 60s. He was making cuts, And the reaction of our brain when looking at a thing like that is exactly of the muscular movement of the artist when doing this stuff. So this is very important. Sorry, I want just to focus on that. The mirror neural systems can understand not only the action, but the intention that underlie the action. And it arouses part of our body. So it has a real action. This means that design has a direct effect, not only on our brain as cognitive systems, but in our whole body. The concept of affordance. Affordance means that I can use my phone and launch as a stone to a terrorist coming in to kill all of us. Well, it won't be very effective, but affordance means that in the design of an object, there is something that even can be not designed voluntarily by the design, but it's still there. The intentionality of objects, it's how they are supposed to be manipulated and used. Something very easy to understand. You got something to pull and something to push. But objects, in a way, like subjects, are receivers of the semantics of a kind of intentionality by the one who designed it. I don't know why this is so fashion. This acts on our MNS, so it's not that nice. Not for ethical reasons. It acts on your body. So I'm not making a kind of rhetorics about, oh, we should make good design because we are good and whatever, because it harms. There is an unconscious of designers. There is a famous story by Gogol, The Dead Souls, where this guy is a big Russian guy, and he wants to eat everything. It's, very, very impositive. And all the stuff in his house is similar to his. And the Gogol says that even the chairs were saying, I'm him, So we have the power of intentionality, the power of objects. This is another Russian thing. It's a movie, Makarov. Makarov is the name of the pistol, still used by the Russian police. And a poet finds a pistol. And the pistol gets power on it, and finally he kills someone and he suicidates. So we got a fascination of goods. More easy to think about when we go to become slaves of objects, we want to buy this and that. Point is that we look at feature, we think in aesthetic terms, and we don't think how this will affect reality. So we think all in terms of representation, not of real effects. And this is really bad for design, urban design, because space is performative. Space is the basis for every kind of politics. I mean, urban space. If you have a bad urban space, you probably have a bad politics. Nikos Salingaros speaks about skyscrapers. He makes a point about that. Skyscrapers are an old model. They're still very fashion, but of course they are a symbol of power. In Italy, you got towers. If you go to Tuscany, you will find the most powerful families of Tuscany were showing their power by building tall towers. They were totally useless, just for showing their power. But how our body reacts to that, it's not just a cultural, symbolic aspect. There is something physical, because culture doesn't come from the moon. It comes from our, possibly, brain, how we are built, and we have been built because of millions of natural evolution. So design is never innocent. Nowadays, architects, designers, engineers saying, well, I'm just doing what they tell me to do. Well, they have a responsibility. Look at nature, the design of nature. I opened my contribution with an image of a wave. There is a long discourse I cannot do here about evolution, but nobody designed the beautiful design of a wave, of an ocean wave. There is no selection for producing that kind of design. It comes after physical laws. We have to respect these physical laws, and we forget it. So natural patterns, as long as human beings are part of nature, help producing a neuroergonomic design. Aesthetic is something else. It has to do with business. It goes with fashion. We need more contact with nature. Everybody knows probably the work of Richard Lowe about nature deficit disorder in children. If children are not put in connection with natural environment before they reach the 6 years old, they get problems in socializing. They don't evolve a part of the brain that is about empathia, so the capability of understanding the feeling of others. So we get this school of biophilic design. Everybody knows about that. It's an amazing work. This is where I live, actually. I think this is biophilic design. We have a mathematics of nature. We think of nature in terms of disorder, this idea of machine that we are talking about. It's not like that. Nature is order. And nature is not alone. Alone, everybody thinks of nature or biophilic design like putting green somewhere. So here we are at neuroergonomics. Neuroergonomics means making design that respect the physical structure of our brain, our nervous system, our psycho-neuro-immuno-endocrinology system. It merged neuroscience and ergonomics. Everybody knows what ergonomics is. And it can measure the effects of design. So to be honest, I'm not a designer, not an architect, but I had this experience several years ago speaking to architects, especially in Italy, and I found this kind of Moloch, a kind of terrible devil. Whatever you can say, this stuff sucks. They say, no, you don't understand because you are ignorant. It's beautiful. It's a masterpiece. I say, well, I can discuss with them. The only thing I can use is another Moloch, another monster. And the other monster is science. They are terrified by science. Architects are, that neuroergonomics works is shown by military, unfortunately. As usual, technology goes like that. So there are a lot of studies, especially the US Army, in order to produce beautiful helmets that allows you to fire rockets so fast, etc. This is not what we want to do, of course. It's a kind of non-military neuroergonomics. But focusing on how we can use the body for making a good design. So neurosciences, ergonomics, and evidence-based design. Something based not on rhetorics, not on aesthetics, but on real effects. We know what ergonomics is. Evidence-based design is something that's been born in America. We have a lot of Americans here, so probably you know about it. I have not so much time now, so I have to run. But point is how a space is performative about your body. This is an example in Italy. So you got Verona, the urban structure of Verona, and a periphery in the Roman suburbia, and different kind of structure. You can measure the structure using the same system that Mariano is using for finding if a tissue has cancer or not, because he patented this beautiful analysis system based on fractality. So he analyzes the shape of cells, and he can tell you really much more before than the normal standard system if that tissue is going to be cancer or not. It's a matter of fractality. I have friends who use to make beautiful architecture that look at the past, because the past was working actually. But I think that just imitation of forms is pointless, because world has changed. On the other side, you got this kind of anti-traditionalism. For example, my friend Ettore, he makes beautiful buildings, and the Italian architects hate him. They say, this sucks, because it's so traditional. This is a kind of religion. So what we can use for building cities that are keen to humans. McKim, great guy, in the 50s, he bought his little moppy after he graduated at Harvard, and he went along Italy looking at this beautiful little town. I say, they are beautiful, and everybody say that. Then he asked why they are beautiful. And he devoted all his life to understanding why. What is the real, what is the genetic code that is behind that? I highly recommend, if you didn't already, to read his Mediterranean Urbanism, published just a couple of years ago. There is a note that is very relevant, I'm almost done, that in a system like in the one we see in the little town, there is not a blueprint. It's very organic. The way of building towns comes from inside, and it follows very simple rules, exactly like our body is grown. This is an example. You got this rule that says you have to respect your neighbor, and for example, his right to the view to the sea. This is the effect down there, a beautiful town. You got an evolution that comes from the single cells, like this, and this is the effect. I say discussion about neuroergonomics as such if it is the most interesting point, because Mariano is here also for the discussion later. That's it.